Nail the drums and you've nailed the mix.
Let's be honest, mixing real drums is a challenge, especially when you're not working professionally or on a daily basis. I thought I was experienced, but I found out that I wasn't really delivering quality on a consistent level. Everything took me more and more time, even with all the digital tools that we have these days. It just didn't work out well. So I started analyzing myself, my workflow, my habits, and my expectations. And it turns out that there seem to be two key aspects. One is time and one is focus. Time is the luxury that we don't have when we're mixing because of listening fatigue. At some point, we can't judge things anymore. It doesn't matter how smart we think we are, it just doesn't work. And focus is what we lose when we are not really delivering what the song needs. As audio engineers, we are service providers for the song. We mustn't deal with things that nobody else than us would ever notice. So there's no focus without time. The two go hand in hand. And that is exactly why I created a plugin that should facilitate my workflow and get me that time back, because I can stay focused. And that is croquesolid. Hello, bonjour und guten Tag. My name is Sascha from TOURAGE DSP. I would like to take you on a tour around a session where we mix the drums from scratch without using any other tools than just croquesolid. Let's go. So we're in Harrison Mixbus 11. This session has 5 tracks on the drums, and track number 5 is a stereo configuration with small diaphragm mics in AB configuration pointing directly downwards to the kit. We have some guitars panned left and right. We have bass guitar in here. To open the mixer, we have some reverb going on here. Just going to mute this for a moment and making the instruments a bit quieter. All the drums go to a drum bus and all the instruments go to an instrument bus. If I briefly listen to the drums, there's something that really bothers me, and that is the muffled kick drum. The snare has too much lower mid muddiness, and especially the hi-hat is bleeding into the snare channel. Yeah, and there are a couple of frequencies on the overheads which I don't like, especially in the crash part, which I would try to get rid of. Okay, let's start with croquesolid here on the kick drum. By the way, all the croquesolid instances that are loaded here already, they are all in that default position. They're not doing anything. Here the deep lead setting is also at its 0 position. And this is where we start. I want to clean up the kick. Yeah, I don't have to fiddle with any of these settings. I just leave it as is. So the muffled sound is maybe because there's no attack from the beater, so it needs a bit of treble. The equalizer has default frequencies. It's a 3-band EQ, but these might not be the frequencies which we need, and therefore there's an auto scan mode, and it just needs a few hits, and then it has captured the most dominant frequencies in the spectrum, which are this muddiness, the resonance from the kick drum, the click frequency, and its first octave, where it applies a high pass, high shelf filter. Yeah, this is the frequency where the kick drum is apparently tuned to. So I generally like to use the dynamic EQ, or the dynamic EQ configuration, which, as opposed to the static EQ, leaves everything around the impact pretty much untouched and just brings out the attack and therefore sounds quite natural. I like this a lot on most instruments. So, kick drum with a bit of optical compression. This one is very forgiving. It's program dependent as the old hardware devices. Yeah, I would use some low and high frequency exciter here because it was a 20-inch kick drum, and this doesn't go very deep, so we add some low end, just a little. Yeah. By using the high frequency exciter, we can add some extra shimmer or air if you want, but maybe back off a bit the highs here. We compensate a bit for the volume increase, and if we compare this to the dry signal, I would say it's an improvement, definitely. Yeah, let's switch over to the snare and make this quick. So let's set the threshold here and get rid of the cymbal bleed, the hi-hats. Yeah, shouldn't fiddle too long with this, it just works. Also set this to dynamic mode and let it capture the snare frequencies. Some low cut. This is what really counts. We need to set this to snare mode. This is important. It was just my own oversight, my own plugin, but now you see, if you set it to the correct mode, it captures the correct frequencies. This is definitely a shell resonance, which I would try to dampen. Yeah, that's the crack frequency, so to say. Let's compare this. Much clearer already. I also would like to use the opto compressor here because the snare doesn't have much impact. They're not really transients that we could use for a punchy rock song. Yeah. If it were too punchy, then we could just dampen it. But yeah, let's bring this out a bit. With snares, I tend to use some saturation, and tape is a great candidate because tape acts as a high-frequency slew rate limiter, if you want. So it just doesn't work broadband, but it really saturates more in the higher registers, and this is where all the transients get sort of smeared when they're just too high in amplitude. Okay. Let's check the overheads. We switch to room or bus mode, which makes way for the stereo section. We don't need debleeding here, but I would like to increase the stereo width a bit. This flips the channels, but we let it stick with drummer's position. I can clearly hear that I measured the distance for each of the overhead mics from the snare, but still the snare is a bit off-center. And with this knob, you can fix this. It just works on it operates on the mid-signal, not the sides. Yeah. This comes in handy to just keep the lows out of the outer stereo field. Now let us try to get rid of this. Yeah, there it is. This is the exact frequency which I find very annoying. So by moving this in a negative position, it's kind of like a de-esser. It's dampening dynamically. So and this also makes room for adding a bit of extra air. Yeah, let's get rid of the low end rumble and add some slam compression, which is a simulation of the old hardware units that had feedback detection mode and the field effect transistor as the attenuating circuit, which produced this over compression that we all love. Of course, I just mix this in very slightly. Yeah, compensate. Yeah, it's just a bit less harsh. So let us work on the toms, and there we have kind of a problematic case. If you hear this rattling, the rattling was caused by, I put this here, by the SM57 that I used. And the SM57 has a rotating grill, as we all know. And at least on this unit, it was so wiggly that it produced a rattling on low frequencies. I put a drop of hot glue on it after the recordings, but the damage was done. So I don't think there's any way to rescue the track apart from using a sample, and that's exactly what we do here. So we choose a 12-inch tom. By the way, it's the exact same tom because it's the exact same drum kit that was used for the sampling process. So we just need to set the threshold to not trigger on the normal hits, but on this. Yeah, I think that works. Yeah. And for the EQ, let's just solo this. Yeah. Let's scan the frequencies just a couple of times. So this is our oh, that's a bit too boomy. Yeah, but this is nice. Yeah, it's definitely better than we had. Maybe we can make this a bit quieter. Yeah, I think Tom 2 is an easier case. Here's a sequence where just to make sure that it doesn't trigger on the normal hits. Yep. And you can clearly hear that the cymbal bleed is gone. No, that's a frequency we don't want. Yep, let's clean up the tom. Yep, let's leave it like that. Maybe slightly too bright. Let's get some substance in. Yeah. So here's our context again, because focus. Yeah. There's something that's still, not ideal, and that is that all the instruments are a bit too isolated for my taste. So, bus compression. Put this to bus mode. Don't need debleeding. And yeah, I think the opto works well here because it just glues all the transients together, although it is a bit cartoonish. So we just back this off a bit and mix this in slightly. Yeah. But it gives that glue and makes everything a bit more uniform. Yeah, it sounds more like one entity, I think. But here's a specialty. And that is Class A tube distortion. Class A is like odd and even order harmonics, very thick, very warm, as some people say. But also, let's just mix this in a bit and make sure it's not louder, because louder is always better, and that's not what we want. We want a clear comparison here. Yeah. But this way we just squeeze the peaks, so which makes it easier for us in the mix, of course. Yeah. I think we've come a long way, because when we turn off croquesolid, this is where we started. Yeah. And this is where we are now. I think this is pretty much 80% of what I wanted here. And from there on, I can just work on the whole song and just put everything in context. So this is croquesolid. It's not my job to talk you into it, you have to try it yourself. So best would be if you go to touragedsp.com/croquesolid and download the trial version, which runs for 14 days without any restrictions. So you can really test it on your material. Yeah, thanks for watching. See you in the next video. Cheers, à bientôt und tschüss.